Right, what is happening, people? Welcome back to another video. As ever, if you're new here, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get on to today's topic of conversation, which is a really interesting article I read in Boxing Insider. Um, if you haven't heard of them, go check them out because they do write some really cool articles. And this one in particular that I'm going to talk about is Bob Arum and his sort of objection to the Ali Act, which to the reform of the Ali Act, the newly enacted Ali Act that could help Zuffa Boxing, um, you know, in their ambitions to become to create unified boxing organizations, UBOs. And Bob Byram, from for those of you who don't know him, have has promoted the likes of Muhammad Ali, and is a real veteran in the sport. You know, he's 94 years of age, 94, and he recently signed an extension with the Zone. But a lot of people don't know that he was, in fact, an attorney before he started promoting Ali, and you know, he was, yeah, he worked with he worked with the Kennedy government, and yeah, he's someone who has a lot of legal experience, and he wrote a two-page letter to the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, calling the newly formed American Boxing Revival Act incredibly problematic and entirely unjustifiable. um, he didn't just oppose the bill; he picked out the exact reasons as to why you know, it wouldn't work. And one of the reasons why he believes it doesn't work, again, this is on this article in Boxing Insider, is that it does not include the protections for fighters set forth by the original Ali Act for the UBO to work. The UBO is not prohibited from entering coercive contracts with fighters. It's not required to provide financial disclosure to fighters, and is not subject to the rule establishing a firewall between managers and promoters. And these are some of the points that make the Ali Act so, I guess, so desirable from fighters, because it protects them in a way. And I'm gonna go run through each of them quite quickly. So the Ali Act offers protection from coercive contracts. So it's illegal for a promoter to lock a fighter into a long-term contract as a condition of getting into a fight. So previously you had promoters, you know, forcing fighters to sign multi-year option contracts just to get on a card. Essentially, if you wanted to fight on a particular card against a particular opponent, you had to sort of sign the rest of your career away with that particular fighter. And one of the most notorious examples is the relationship between Don King and Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was born into a family that was quite chaotic, to say the least. He found a release in boxing. He was a standout amateur, and then he crossed paths with Don King in 1985, and they went on a really big run together. You know, Don King and Mike Tyson, I guess his career is synonymous with Don King and etc. And vice versa. Sorry, but there were problems, and I mean, just recently, Mike Tyson sued Don King for $100 million. The case settled for $14 million, a fraction of what was taken. Tyson alleged that Don King made him sign business contracts that paid consulting fees to his family members, and he billed Tyson for his own travel, security, renovations, and legal battles. But only got $40 million out of a possible 100 million. And you know, in the later stages of his career, he signed with Shelley Finkel and sort of fired a whole portion of his team. You know, and he really lost a lot of money into his in his career, despite being one of the most renowned heavyweights in the world. And yeah, I guess that's something. Guess that's something that's often missed, and forms part of the reason why he then had to fight Jake Paul recently, just to because he was in a lot of financial trouble, and he's now rumored to fight Floyd Mayweather. So a great having to resort to fighting in his retirement, where he should treat that as, you know, doing something other than fighting. He's had to resort back to fighting is sad to see, and it's the exact sort of situation that the RD Act prevented. And another faction is that it required financial disclosure to fighters. So Chris Algieri is mentioned here. He had a he sort of had an agreement with his promoter, um, and throughout his career, and Chris Algieri sort of, I guess, grew up on the smaller hall shows, and he was one of the fighters where he was fighting for legacy as opposed to money. And I think in his first 15 fights, or first 19 fights, the highest purse that he made was $15,000. And if you're having to pay for food, you're having to pay for expenses, you're having to pay for managers, trainers, sparring partners, etc. It all adds up. So he wasn't making a lot. And then when he was signed to fight Errol Spence, he was being paid $325,000, while his promoter kept an equal share of $650,000. He demanded to see the amount that was being paid in full, to which his promoter declined. So, um, yeah, that didn't really make sense. And sort of the reason why the UBOs are so frowned upon by a lot of people in the industry is because if they were to happen, um, a fighter would have no legal sort of right to know what the organization earns from a broadcast deal, a gate, a sponsorship, etc. They were negotiating the dark, which is basically what the boxers did before um, 2000, and is basically what is happening now with the current MMA model. You have you have the MMAs making MMA organization, the UFC, are making a lot of money, but the fighters aren't really seeing a lot of that. In fact, just 20% of the purse, 20% of the overall revenue is given to fighters. Remaining 80% is pocketed by the UFC and the richer stakeholders, which is something that is talked about a lot. And then the final sort of problem that it that arises from this newly formed Aliyat the is the confusion between managers and promoters. So you can't your manager can't be a promoter, because it sort of muddies the two, right? A manager a good manager should aim to get you as much money as possible, and a good promoter is looking after their best financial interests. They want to keep the costs down to a minimum if they can, and there's a clear conflict of interest there. In this current model, there is it sort of muddies the waters. And the article goes on to mention a guy called Pat English, who is actually the attorney who helped draft the original Aliyat, and he serves as general counsel to the Association of Boxing Commissions. And now this is the guy who, as mentioned, helped draft the Aliyat, and he's called this a betrayal of the current act, and sort of removing what he and all the others worked hard um, to try and do. And he goes on to write that the bill is designed for a single purpose: to allow the new Zuffa boxing entity to avoid restrictions designed to protect boxers. And under the Revival Act, the UBOs can in fact operate as both promoter and sanctioning body. Again, they negotiate the contracts, they negotiate which fighters get the title shots, what fighters get paid, where they get ranked, um, etc. Now, this isn't an opinion piece. This is a legal analysis from Don King, so I guess it serves some purpose. Don King has seen the evolution of boxing from before the Ali Act, to now. He's seen the transition. He knows how it works. He isn't just someone who is just offering their perspective. He's lived it, and I guess if someone like him has something to say about it, then it's an issue. It's a view that is worth respecting. And I guess from his perspective, right, he's a promoter. He wants to make most money as possible. But if a promoter is having an issue um with the newly formed Boxing Revival Act, then um it's something that needs to be taken into account, I believe, going forward. But yeah, those are just a couple of thoughts on Bob Arum's sort of view on this, and it's something that I guess should be respected considering his longevity in the sport. Um, and I'll leave a link to that article in the description below because I thought it was quite interesting. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Thank